Hey guys, Eric here out at the Don Law Golf Academy at beautiful Osprey Point Golf Club in Boca Raton, Florida. Now in today's video, JT and I are going to talk about the iron versus the driver swing and really what are the key differences you can put into your swing that you need to know to be able to hit each one of those clubs really well. Now before we dive in, if you are up in the Northeast and you want to check out, JT has an awesome indoor facility, Dollar Bill Divot Club in Staten Island, New York. We'll put the link down in the description down below. Would highly recommend it to get your game in shape this winter, both for practice, for lessons, all that. And if you do want to work with JT and I, maybe you're not in the Northeast or wherever you are in the world, would love for you guys to check out cogornogolf.com and really start taking online lessons. Our online lessons are just as effective as in person, if not better. The awesome community we have at Cogorno Golf really give you everything you need to take your game to the next level. By the way, guys, as this video does start, if you do like the video, JT and I would love if you click that like button. We would love if you click the subscribe and leave a comment down below. So, JT, thanks for coming out.
For sure.
Appreciate you being here.
Of course.
After that awesome intro.
Yeah.
Let's talk about iron versus driver, JT. So,
Perfect.
I think there's three things that we really want to talk about here, right? For someone watching saying, hey, I'm working on my swing, I'm doing whatever movement, but I want to know, is it the same for the irons? Is it different for the driver? Really, what are the key differences? And I think up front, I want to say, while the one thing we would say is whatever your main macro swing thing is you're working on,
Got to do it with every club.
you got to do it with every club.
Yeah,
So
doesn't
almost always it's like, hey, does this apply to driver and all of it? Yes. If my club face is open,
Gotta close it.
I got to close it. If
Yeah.
I got to turn more, I got to turn more, right, with all clubs. But having said that, sometimes we're always like, you know, with a caveat of, here's some couple differences. So maybe why don't we start with the setup pieces,
Awesome.
and then we'll work our way one or two backswing and then some downswing. So if I've got an 8-iron here, JT. Let's say I take my normal setup position, and we'll do it like this so they can see from this camera. If we look at the 8-iron setup, and we'll just call it like a short to mid-iron versus the driver, are there a handful of things that might change a little bit?
Yes, for sure. So the biggest thing I would say is the stance isn't going to be as wide with an iron versus a driver.
Yeah.
The sternum is going to be much more on top of the ball, and the shoulders are going to feel a lot more level, right? So not going to have very much right side bend or right tilt here at setup. You notice when you do that, that moves the sternum kind of behind the ball, kind of presets us in a bad position to be able to hit this ball solid. Obviously, you want to hit the ball first in the ground. So getting that sternum really stacked on top of the ball is a super big key, iron versus driver.
And so, and I guess even before we get into the setup, what I should have said there, like, what are we trying to do different with the clubs, right?
Yeah.
So what you just said there. So like all the setup, the backswing, the downswing pieces, why would they be any different? I would say, we would both say for two reasons. One would be with the iron, the ball's sitting on the ground normally. I've got it teed up, but normally on the ground. I'm trying to hit the ball first, ground second, and hit down on the ball.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if I'm trying to hit down on the ball, some body placement things are going to need to be different, and so I'm going to set up different. Driver, I'm hitting more up on, and I'm going to set up a little bit differently. So we've got the feet width part, right?
Yep.
So maybe with my 8-iron, if I were to draw straight lines up with my ankles just to give them a checkpoint, maybe like shoulder width.
Shoulder width is
It's
perfect.
a good start.
Yep.
And then from a ball position perspective, let's say with an iron more like middle or just forward of middle.
Yeah, with the 8-iron, I would say you can put it in the middle.
Yeah.
That's really, again, anytime you move the ball back in the stance, that helps us hit more down. That's really the reason that you put the ball back more with an iron versus a driver.
Yeah, so I wouldn't like have my driver back here
No.
to hit up, and I wouldn't have my iron up here.
Yes.
And so with this, you know, I might be looking at like left eye, left ear, just forward of sternum, something like that.
Which is great, yep.
So I got feet width, and then you said the tilt. So if I look at tilt, if we were to like draw a straight line up through my spine, and we just looked at it to keep it simple, and I've got an iron, as my irons get longer, I'm gonna
Progressively add some more of that right side bend.
Yeah.
Again, just because we're trying to flatten out that angle of attack. As the club gets longer, all we're doing is trying to help preset these alignments so
Yeah.
that we can kind of do the same thing when we hit the ball.
Yeah, got it. So with an 8-iron, I might have like 2, 3, 4 degrees of tilt, maybe something like that. And then as I get longer with my driver. So we got ball position, we've got feet width. And then, you know, I think the other variable to keep in mind, which should happen as a natural byproduct of the club, is the forward bend.
Yes.
So obviously with a shorter club versus longer club, there'll be some differences there.
Yep. Yeah. Shorter versus longer, obviously. The shorter the club, you're going to be bending over a little bit more. I think a big key on how to do some forward bend is making sure we're not getting too much kind of tilt in the pelvis, right? Really bending over too much there.
Yeah, butt real back.
Butt real back, yeah. That sets us up to run into some issues when we actually start moving. So I think it's important that if you are struggling to get the setup right, you can bend your knees a little bit more, you can round your spine a little bit more, rather than really putting the butt back. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's going to make it harder for us to move that way.
The more bent over part's really more from the rounding compared to the as much from the hips.
Correct.
So ball position, a more neutral, feet more shoulder width, right? A little bit less tilt, and then a little bit more rounded. And the main key differential being the less tilt in ball position for the effect of being able to hit down on the ball versus the driver. So as we look at the driver, right, and some of these same sort of pieces, and we take our normal setup position, let's say I were to look something like this, JT. So all of those variables have changed, right? This would be like my 8-iron where I was, and then this would be my driver. So my feet got wider, right? Ankles farther apart. And one of the, so feet wider, right? I think feet wider as the clubs get longer. With my driver, our goal would be max distance.
Yes.
And with the goal with an iron is like specific distance.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, we're trying to obviously hit that number. Tiger always talks about that. That's a big thing. Always trying to hit the ball pin high.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to control distance. With driver, we're trying to get it out there as far as we can.
Max distance. So
Max
feet
distance.
wider, easier to shift some pressure, create some more force.
Correct.
Hit it a little farther. Ball position, obviously I've got the ball teed up. I'm trying to hit up on the ball. So if I look at where the ball is in my stance, maybe more forward towards like lead armpit, lead shoulder.
Yeah, lead armpit's perfect. Just inside the lead heel as well as another way to think about it.
And that's going to help me with the hitting up more part.
Correct.
Right?
The driver's going to bottom out almost a little behind the ball, right? And we want to then be hitting up on the ball.
A little more up on it.
Absolutely.
And then with the hitting up portion, to keep my head more back, right? To keep my lead shoulder more back, my sternum more back, we would preset some more tilt at setup, a little bit more of the side bend at setup. And so as I'm doing that side bending, maybe someone's looking for, 8, 10, 12 degrees would be like pretty good amount of tilt.
For sure.
Right, if we're really trying to exaggerate.
Yeah.
So more tilt, ball more forward, feet wider, and then if I were to look at how much rounded I am or bent over from down the line, I'd be taller.
Yeah, have a lot less.
A lot less bent.
For sure.
And as a byproduct of the club mostly.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Just getting the club on the ground is the goal.
Yeah.
I tell a lot of my students basically, if you can push the club into the ground too far, you're probably too low. If the club doesn't touch the ground, again, you're probably too high. So if you really have the ability to push that club down, exactly.
Okay.
So if it's just sitting
down here.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So if you're just sitting there, standing there, and the club's just kind of, you can lightly tap the ground pretty easily, I think that's an easy way because everybody's arms are different lengths,
Yeah, it's a good one, a good little checkpoint with that. I like one of the things too, we talked with Marty, where he was mentioning if you put your hand on the side of your right leg, here like this, and just get your fingertips down to your kneecap, that would give you like, all right, I'm kind of have sufficient tilt there, right? I got a nice amount of tilt here, side bend at address. So
yeah, I love it.
I like those simple setup positions for the intent of hitting the shot differently. Now, let's take a break for a second and we'll talk a couple backswing pieces.
Great, cool.
So JT, let's talk backswing. So the driver versus the iron backswing, again, with the fundamental understanding that like the core main root things you're doing in your normal swing, you're also doing with your iron, you're also doing with your driver, right? Same baseline fundamentals.
Yes.
But having said that, maybe a couple key minor differences that we want to look at. So maybe what are some of those things?
So I think, again, all with the intent of hitting more down on the ball with an iron versus a driver. The more that our sternum gets in front of the ball, the more we're going to be able to hit down. So I think understanding the sternum location throughout the swing and the backswing really helps us to be able to hit more down on this ball versus a driver we're trying to hit more up. Yeah. So, if you were to take a backswing here, just kind of getting your setup, the goal for us on the backswing would really be trying to feel like our sternum is much more on top of the ball in the backswing. So we don't want our upper body to feel like it's moving too far to the right. Yeah, exactly. It's going to make it harder for us to really hit down on this ball.
Yeah.
And then just kind of the basic understanding too with your head is if you can feel like your head is almost going to be right on top of the ball as well. So sternum location, head location are two swing cues that you can use to help you really hit down on this ball.
Yeah.
That's huge for us on the backswing.
And then obviously with the same principle, if I had the driver, we would be maybe allowing a little bit more freedom of where the head and sternum are at for the opposite effect, right?
Correct.
So yeah, what would that look like?
Yeah, so we're trying to hit more down, or sorry, trying to hit more up here on this driver, obviously. And the head can feel like it's moving off the ball. The sternum can feel like it's moving off the ball. Again, and this gives us some freedom too. With the driver, we're trying to create some speed. We're trying to create some movement, some athletic and dynamic movement. Because here, you know, we're trying to create speed. We're trying to hit up on the ball. We're trying to hit it far. The more we can feel like the sternum goes kind of off the ball. It also helps with our hips. So we know, obviously, very good drivers of the ball, their hips are more forward than their sternum when they're actually hitting.
Yeah.
And so when we get our upper body or sternum more off of the ball, it helps our hips kind of stay where they are for our body to balance itself out. So the more we move off the ball, the more our hips will kind of stay forward. Versus with the with the iron, the more we move our sternum more on top of the ball, that's what we're looking to do, help us hit down. Our hips will stay where they are. Yeah. With the driver, we're really trying to get that sternum off of the ball and then have those hips move forward, really allow us to get into some nice side bend, hit up on the ball. So yeah, those are huge.
And let's dig into that. So let's say as we work into the downswing, right, because that's beautiful. The backswing, the main difference would be kind of where our head and sternum is at relative to do we want to hit down, hit up, where our low point's at. So with that said, one of the key things I think as a visual that we've showed in some of the videos that I think helps, with the iron, as we work during our downswing, if we draw a circle around the head, right, in the lead shoulder, and we go up to the top, right, that head's gonna more or less stay where it started.
Yep.
More or less with the iron. And then what you're gonna see with good iron strikers is they're gonna move their head, their sternum and lead shoulder down and forward some amount until about halfway down during the downswing, and then it really stabilizes. And it stabilizes there until about arms parallel into the follow through.
For sure.
Right?
I think the relationship between basically the hips and the sternum on these iron shots versus driver is a really big deal. And I think that on the downswing where you just demonstrated, the more we can actually move our sternum ahead of our belt buckle on the downswing really is what allows us to hit it nice. Exactly. You really don't want to have, if you start to get a ton of lateral movement really with the pelvis, it's harder to get the sternum really in front of the ball. So the feeling is actually much more bracing with the legs to allow your shoulders and your torso to really get on top of the ball. If our legs begin to buckle, knees get closer together, hips slide too far, now we're struggling really to get the sternum.
Secondary toe. Yeah.
Exactly. So with the irons, it's a really big deal for us to understand, hey, I'm trying to create some downward angle of attack. If I get this hip slide too aggressively, it's going to be hard for my shoulders to really catch up and get on top of the ball.
And that if my hips get too far forward too early relative to my upper, sternum back, shoulder back, not hitting down, low point behind the ball.
Correct.
Yeah. So let's say the driver then is some of the opposite stuff, right?
Absolutely.
So I know, like, if we look at good drivers, and maybe we'll show, like, if you look at a still picture of their setup tilt and then impact tilt, let's say they're 7, 8, 10, whatever degrees at setup, tilted this way, side bend. At impact, some of them could be like 30. So I mean, they're way more back, right, with their head, sternum, lead, shoulder, compared to where they started with. And like the iron, where we said, hey, they stay in the circle, go down and forward, then stay there. A lot of the elite drivers, we would see, JT, right, would be they stay in the circle or go a little right of it with the head on the way back. And then they either stay there or they move just slightly forward, but very minimal. But once they get to about left arm parallel in the downswing, and it's funny how it happens like almost all of them at the same time.
Yep.
Their head, if you drew the line there, starts to back out, right? Their head starts to actually work back a little bit. Sternum's back, shoulder works up. Now, obviously when they're doing that, they're still, pelvis is pushing up towards the sky and forward some amount. They're not like 80% of their back foot,
no.
But their head and shoulders are more back so they can hit more up, right?
Yes.
And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that with the driver, what we're trying to do is we want to get the pressure left really early because we want to be able to push off of that to then get our head more back, right? Versus an iron, we can really just have that pressure keep going gradually more and more forward throughout the downswing. With the driver, the more we get off, the more we can get the pressure back early, and then we have a lot of pressure to push off of to kind of get our sternum backing up.
As a reaction to that early push.
Yes.
Yeah, got it.
So that's kind of why we really want to get off the ball.
Maybe in a little bit here.
Maybe, yeah.
So let's just recap this, right? Iron versus driver. Hey, Eric, JT, is the iron swing different than the driver? Yes and no. No in that your macro thing should be the same. If you've got to change your grip, change your wrist angle, and turn more during the backswing, you got to do that with all clubs. You might even need to do it more as the clubs get longer.
Yes.
Right? But there are some key setup fundamental differences. The key ones we would look at would be ball position, feet width, side bend, we'll call it forward bend.
Perfect.
Right? Those are the changes that are going to adjust a little bit. On the way back with the iron, we like to stay more centered with the head and the sternum to help the downswing and hitting a little bit more forward compression. Driver, we allow a little bit of movement to the right with the sternum and the head to help the downswing pieces. So good so far?
It's perfect. Yeah,
So
keep going.
downswing, the
This is
sternum, upper body, head, lead, shoulder will work a little bit more down and forward relative to the lower, gradual pressure shift. Driver, the head, sternum, shoulder be a little bit more back, quicker pressure shift into the left that we push out of. A+?
A+. I mean, I don't know if I could have said it better myself.
We'll just cut the first 3/4 of that video and have that on at the end. So
Yeah.
that's iron versus driver, guys. That's the info that we would look at. You have seen some differences there and give some visuals. Hopefully that helps you guys. If you did like this iron versus driver video, we're gonna put another one on the screen here. You guys can click that. If you wanna work with JT and I online, we would love to have you at cogornogolf.com. We'll put that. And as always, if you wanna see JT in person, we'll also put the link, Dollar Bill Divot Club, down below. Thank you guys for watching.